Hold on. Never seen that before. I'm Aaron Freeman, and I love how Ian Cunningham is so focused on value and building draft currency.
I'm Tori McElhaney, and the free agency frenzy is sort of over, but I think the Falcons can still do some dealing.
I'm Miles Garrett. We know the Falcons are finally going after some Georgia Bulldogs, but are they looking at some Yellow Jackets too? Let's talk about it.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Falcons Squad Show. I'm your host, Jarvis Davis, and riding with me today, I got my main man, Aaron Freeman, host of Locked On Falcons, Tori McElhaney, who is the big dog senior reporter at AtlantaFalcons.com, and also I have my main man, Miles Garrett, who is the creator of the Nest ATL. Listeners of the Falcons Squad Show, I want to say thank you for being a huge part of the Locked On, and because you guys have made us the #1 sports podcast network. We appreciate that from you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. The Falcon Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Coming up on today's show, Matt Ryan and company has their eyes on the flats. And what is the best case or worst case scenario for Tua? And Ian Cunningham and Jeff Ulbrich are on the same page now. But first, Ian Cunningham spoke to the media last week about the first wave of free agents that they brought in. And Ian said something that I thought that was very interesting, guys and gals. He stated that he went into free agency with the mindset of upgrading their floor. Tori, when you hear that phrase, what does your mind go to where, as far as where Ian Cunningham is, how he's approaching free agency?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought that it was very real, like saying that you're elevating the floor, saying that you're going after some key depth pieces, like guys who have starting experience, who you can plug and play with. I thought that was very much, he was being very real and very honest about where the Falcons sit and where they currently are towards the cap. You knew going into the 2026 offseason, the Falcons weren't going to be big movers and shakers in free agency, but I'll be really honest that they made a lot more moves than I think I even thought they were going to make going into this period. Now, I know a lot of these are like vet minimum deals on like a 1-year deal type of situation, very cap friendly. But in my opinion, it is one of those things where you needed those things. You needed to be able to say that you have depth in certain areas. And I think that was the one thing that, looking at this roster from top to bottom going into the free agency period, the Falcons did have a lot of work to do with key positions across their entire roster to do exactly what Ian Cunningham said, which was elevate the floor. And so I'm curious to see, once these guys really get in here and we can see where they fall in line within their positions, I'll be curious to see. But I think overall they did exactly what they set out to do within the confines of what they could do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because when you look at what this team needed, like you said, they had a needed linebacker position, because we knew they weren't going to sign Caden Ellis back because it was just too rich for their blood. And you bring in a guy like Channing Tindall, you bring in a guy like Christian Harris, and the thing that I like, Tori, how he was very specific as to what those guys' roles are going to be. He mentioned special teams. You mentioned potentially starting. Like, those are things that are on the table for a guy like Channing Tindall. So I really feel like, we talk about vision, the lack of vision for the previous regime. I feel like Ian Cunningham has it pretty much laid out as to what he's trying to do and where he is with this organization. And like you said, being real, being honest with yourself, looking in the mirror like, okay, I don't have that much money. I don't have that much draft capital, but I need to fill out my roster. And I think that finding value in early on in free agency, I feel like that was an excellent strategy. Now, for you, Miles, where do you sit when it comes to the mindset of what Ian was trying to do coming in and Do you think he's kind of like on the right track as far as in 2026 is his first season being the general manager?
Yeah, and excuse me, it's something I mentioned on last week's show as well. And Jarvis, you weren't there for talking about the discount bargain section at the back of
They
back of
reduced
all of
me
you.
out,
We're
baby.
talking
I'm
about
telling you, man, it's legendary, baby.
It's the best
At
spot to
Kroger?
go,
Oh my
man.
gosh.
You know. But no, I mean, I think Falcons fans may not want to hear this per se, but look, they don't have a whole lot of money to deal with. They only have 5 draft picks. You got to work with the cards that you're given at this point, that being Ian Cunningham, Matt Ryan, Kevin Stefanski, all these guys looking at these deals. And it's a lot of one-year deals. It's a lot of depth pieces, as you just mentioned, getting some guys in there, as you said, or as Ian Cunningham said, rather, to raise that floor, get some guys behind and fill out some of these positions. We mentioned the wide receiver spot, how they basically had no bodies in there. Now they've got a few more in there. You've got the defensive tackle room, the linebacking room that you've kind of mixing and matching some spots. I do want to see them add some more spots, maybe to the secondary, specifically that cornerback spot. That was really the area outside of the areas they've already addressed that I was really looking for them to add something. But yeah, I mean, I think 2027 is the year that this regime is looking at to really make this roster look like what they want it to look like and put forth a team. Again, it's not like what it was back in 2021 where the team was in cap hell and they really didn't have a whole lot of money to deal with at all and were filling in bodies left and right. This year, I think it's a lot more guys that could really produce. I mean, you look at the wide receiver room, Jahan Dotson, Olamide Zaccheaus. These are guys that I feel like right now, I mean, knock on wood, but I feel like will be producers for this team in 2026. Austin Hooper as well. And you obviously look at the defensive front, the guys you just mentioned. I do like the moves. And then quarterback, I think the big elephant in the room, of course, Tua Tagovailoa. But overall, I like what they've done. I just want to see them add in a few more other spots.
Yeah, I think that's definitely on the table. We'll talk about how AJ Terrell may help out with it. So, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. But Free, when you think about what Ian Cunningham's mindset going into this free agency period, new league year, first year as a general manager, are you on the side of, hey, this kind of makes sense? This was the type of perspective that he had to have, or do you feel like he could have gone another way with it? And do you feel like he's on the right track?
No, it definitely makes sense. And like Tori, I was a little surprised how active they were out the gates with some of the signings. Like, they got like 5 or 6 signings on the first day of the illegal tampering period. And I thought that would be how many we would get over the course of that first week, just because of what both Tori and Miles have pointed out with the expectation that the Falcons would be value shopping, right? It's not to say that their salary cap situation, as Miles pointed out, is as dire as it was 5 years ago, where they're really on the hook for the next couple of seasons. It's really this season that the Falcons have to navigate a pretty tight cap situation. And once you get Kirk Cousins off the books next year, that's really going to open up a ton of cap space, where I think when we're having this conversation about raising the floor versus raising the ceiling, like next year, I think when you have that cap space and if you're going to maybe make some big swings in terms of free agency, that's where you're really looking to sort of raise the ceiling for this football team. But for the time being, investing in the depth, which was a major issue for this team at several areas that I think really did a number on, sort of undermining their season last year because they did not necessarily have strong depth. And so sort of rebuilding that, getting some guys on some cheap 1-year contracts, very similar strategy that Terry Fontenot and company used in their first couple of years when they had limited cap space, and seeing sort of who are going to be the guys that are going to go out there, play well in 2026. And when that Falcons team has a lot more room to spend next year, they can reward those guys with some, multi-year contracts that pay them on par. So I think it was a smart approach to free agency, an aggressive approach to free agency, even if it wasn't the sort of classic aggressive approach of free agency when we think about, handing out, $100 million contracts left and right, like they're Tic Tacs or anything like that. So I think the Falcons did a good job trying to find value, trying to, aim low in the sense of we're going to sign some discounts, we're going to do some bargain bin shopping. And then you also get the added benefit of, that allows you to build some draft currency into the future years if you can get some compensatory picks in 2027 with several of the departures that the Falcons are losing. They're going to lose quite a bit with some of those players, but I think they did about as good a job as you could do with the sort of price range that they were at, sort of, filling those voids left by players like Caden Ellis and others this offseason.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at those guys that walk out of their door, like, I know Tyler Algier is a fan favorite. He's one of my favorite running backs. I love watching him run the football in the fourth quarter when teams are tired. That was an excellent scenario for that was a winning formula for the Atlanta Falcons, I feel. But when you look at where you are from a salary cap standpoint, where you're trying to go and be financially stable for the next couple of years, it just didn't make any sense to sign another running back or keep him in the fold, and especially when he was looking for between $5 and $6.5 million a year, and he ended up getting it because, hey, he's a hell of a running back. So you definitely have to kind of understand what that is. Now, Tori, we've been talking a lot about value and trying to go bargain bin shopping or shopping at the reduced meat aisle, as I like to affectionately refer to it as. For you, out of all these signings, is there one particular player that kind of stands out and you say, oh yeah, I feel like this guy might be able to get his shine on this year?
So I feel like this is low-hanging fruit, but I feel like we got to talk about it in the first 15 minutes of the podcast with Tua. I think that
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I agree.
You had to go into this offseason and I've said this over and over until I've blue in the face. If getting a new GM and a head coach was 1A priority for this organization in 2026, figuring out your quarterback situation was 1B. And I think that for the value that you got, it's a little over $1 million that you're paying Tua, who's a veteran in this league. I know he has kind of the medical history. I know all of that, but you needed someone who could come in the event that you couldn't have Michael Penix start week 1. You needed to have a backup plan, and you needed to feel secure in a backup plan. And I think that I don't know what it's going to be like for Tua in 2026. I don't know what it's going to be like for Michael Penix Jr. in 2026. But in terms of needing to feel going into this offseason that you had at least put a plan together at the quarterback position, you did that within the first couple of days of the free agency period of the new league year coming forth. And so I think that should give you a sense of ease going into the offseason program, going into training camp, going into week 1 of the season. Now, again, who's to say anything works out? Who's to say that it does work out? There's so many variables right now with the quarterback position, but I think the fact that you were able to get to on the cheap side as somebody who has veteran experience, as somebody who can come in and kind of carry you however long you need to, I think that was really, really important to feel a sense of ease about where the team is right now.
Yeah, and it makes all the sense in the world because a lot of people, feel a certain way about Tua. They feel like you said, you got the injury history and everything like that, and you got a guy who has an injury history, and you're trying to figure out what's going on with him. And I think one of the things that you have to look at when you're saying to yourself, okay, this is one of those things where, all right, I have a need. I have a need to get a viable starting quarterback. Hey, I can get this guy for $1.3 million who was a Pro Bowler a couple of years ago. And he led the league in passing yardage.
Here's the thing too about Tua is that when I had the chance to talk to him after he signed, and he was talking about this feeling like a good reset for him, a good reset year, a good fresh start for him. And he knows that the last couple of years haven't been what anyone needed them to be, Miami or himself. And so I think that he is very aware of this is a true it's not a make or break season. I think that we have seen guys Baker Mayfield. You've seen guys be kind of these journeymen and, have starting roles and then kind of come off of those and then go back, and it's all well and good. I think with Tua, it's that's something that I think is very much in his head, not putting words in his mouth, but when he's talking about resetting, when he's talking about a fresh start, I think for some guys that actually does really, really matter as you're going into the next phase of your career, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I think that, what about you, Free? What do you feel that, Tua, just from a value standpoint, or do you feel like there's someone else that you look at that the Falcons have signed and say, hey, they got some good value there?
Yeah, I mean, Tua is the obvious choice. Shout out to Tori for going first and getting that out the way. But I think if you're probably looking at the rest of this group and you're going for sort of who's number 2 on that list, I think you know Christian Harris, I think, really has a good chance to be a big value bet for the Falcons. They're getting him at a little shy, I think, on a 1-year deal under $3 million. And the potential for them to get an impact starter at that linebacker position, I think, is reasonably high. Now he's dealt with some injury issues, which has caused him to not necessarily start for the Texans the last couple of seasons, but he was on track to sort of be a fixture in that defense before those injury issues sort of hit him at the end of I believe the 23 or the beginning of the 24 season. So it's one of those things where like this is potentially a swing that if the Falcons can sort of get in him, similar to what they had with Divine Diablo last year, who was kind of an under the radar sort of free agent signing, that first move that they made, but probably not the big sexy name that I think a lot of people were expecting the Falcons to make at the outside of free agency, but then wound up being kind of their most valuable player through the first like 5 or 6 games of the season on defense. I think Harris has an opportunity to, have a similar impact on this defense, being able to add that speed, being able to average that coverage ability, which I think allows Jeff Ulbrich to be a little bit more flexible defensively than what he necessarily had to do when Caden Ellis was there. We all know Caden Ellis was an excellent player, but you were kind of forced to kind of use him in certain ways because of how skillful he was when it came to rushing the quarterback. And now I think adding a player like Harris can give you a little bit more flexibility, because now you can maybe bring pressure from other areas because you have an extra linebacker helping out in the middle of that coverage, rather than just simply like when we're rushing 5, we know that 5th guy more often than not is going to be Caden Ellis. And now you can kind of mix and match a little bit. And so that gives Jeff Ulbrich a little bit of a wrinkle to play with on defense. And I think having a player like Christian Harris helps that.
I like the way you're thinking on that one. And I think that, the more guys you can give Jeff Ulbrich to work with, the more you're going to be in a better spot for that defense to get off to a good start, because they're gonna need it. Because like I said, we don't know who the starting quarterback going to be on week 1, so you got to know the guys that are going to be able to get after it on the defense side of football. Miles, who do you feel is that guy that you kind of pinpointed and kind of circling the block on, say, okay, this might be the guy that can have a good one in 2026?
Well, again, not to sound like a broken record, but like Tori said, again, just the value and the money you're getting with Tua, that's the big one, no doubt, just because of the importance of the position. And you look at a lot of this is subjective, right? I mean, I think back to like we were talking about sort of that 2021 class when you brought in a guy like Cordero Patterson, who you didn't really expect at the time to sort of be the player that he became for this Falcons team. And you could have some guys in this group, I mean, who's to say that Jahan Dotson couldn't have a year like Darnell Mooney, and suddenly we're having this conversation next offseason, say, hey, they finally found this wide receiver too. But to answer your question, I really look at a guy like Aziz Ojulari. I mean, I don't know if we have, we don't know the outlook right now of James Pierce Jr. And Tori, correct me if I'm wrong, would he be the guy that would step in theoretically for a James Pierce at that position?
I think it would be by committee. I don't think you can just 1-for-1 switch out.
Sure, but essentially just getting the guy to rush the passer. We saw what he did his rookie year, setting that rookie Giants record. He's dealt with some injuries the past couple of seasons. That's definitely something they're going to have to monitor, and really, frankly, something that a lot of these signings have had to deal with. They've had a lot of injury struggles, on the defensive front as well. But a guy like Aziz Ojulari, this Jeff Ulbrich defense, getting to the quarterback, continuing that momentum that they really established in 2025 that got them to bring Jeff Ulbrich back and have that at such high priority. I really do think a guy like Ojulari can bring that pass rush help. And again, they've added some depth to that position as well to really streamline this going forward and continue that momentum. So it's a lot of what ifs, a lot of stuff that we could be having a completely different conversation. Who's to say that Olamide Zaccheaus, we might be having a conversation about him next year, saying, wow, what a breakout season. He really found his footing right back here in Atlanta. So it's, again, no sexy pick in this free agent class outside of the Tua Tagovailoa, but my eyes are on Aziz Ojulari.
I mean, I'm tired of sexy, Miles. Can I just be honest? I'm tired of sexy with this team. Like, give me some ugly signings, and then it's always good to be pleasantly surprised. It's always good to be pleasantly surprised. You know what I'm saying? even relationship. I ain't gonna get into relationships today. We're not gonna go there. So I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold that down. Free, don't look at me like that, man.
I'm just you're talking about sexy and ugly, and then you're getting into relationships, and I'm like, where's Jarvis going with this? But go ahead.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep us on track because I can't take us off track because I'm holding it down, for Tenitra. So I can't. I'm doing my best Tenitra impression today, which is a very weird thing to say. All right, coming up next, we're gonna talk about the conversation that Jeff Ulbrich and Ian Cunningham had. They're on the same page now. First, gotta let you know that this episode of the Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. I'm talking about from early tip-offs to late night West Coast shootouts. There's always action on the board with FanDuel. And now, FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever floats your boat. You can make spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. More money, baby. It's always going to work out for you in that particular manner. So go safe, go bold, and ride with the team you've been following all season because it's your parlay, it's your style. Now, with a little bit more money on that bad boy with the profit boost. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. I want to say thank you for making the Falcon Squad your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On Falcons with the most humble host in the business. Your guy, your man, you know him, Aaron Freeman. He's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Aaron, we'll start with you. All right, so Ian talked about being in alignment with what they want, what he and the coaches want in the player. And he more so kind of deferred to the coaches saying it's all about what they want in a player. And I think that when he said that, it kind of made me think about Jeff Ulbrich and how he was just running and raving about Caden Ellis, and he was just saying, hey, man, it's going to take 17 guys to replace Caden Ellis if we lose him. He's just an excellent player and all this stuff. And I started to think about, like, okay, I know that he probably would wanted the Falcons to sign Caden, bring Ellis back. But when you think about the financial ramifications of that and what we talked about in that first segment and how the Falcons almost had to come into with their mindset about finding value, I just didn't see a path back for him. But now it seems like they might be on the same page. So what do you think that conversation went like when Jeff Ulbrich and Ian Cunningham kind of sat down and had that conversation about what the type of player that he's looking for?
Well, I think you nailed it, Jarvis, when you talked about needing multiple players to replace Caden Ellis, because there's only really one Caden Ellis in terms of what he brings to the table, and so you kind of needed to go out there and find multiple players that can do different aspects of what Caden Ellis is going to bring. You saw the Falcons invest in a number of edge rushers. In Samson Ebukam, Aziz Ojulari, Cameron Thomas. You get a couple of guys on the interior as well. And sort of all of that's meant to kind of enhance the idea that you can generate more effective four-man pass rush because you're not going to necessarily be as reliant on that five-man rush that we saw was so successful for this team last year, which 30 of their 57 sacks last year, over half of them came when they brought five or more rushers this past season. And so you're trying to enhance that. And so you're not necessarily going out there and splurging on a Trey Hendrickson or Jalen Phillips or something like that to sort of be that one man wrecking crew that's going to give you that four-man pass rush, but kind of spreading the love around so that you can do the thing that we know the Falcons did last year, which is have those waves of rushers up front. And being able to constantly rotate those guys, which was another factor in why this pass rush saw a boost. And then as we were talking about earlier, you're going to lose something in terms of the run defense and coverage ability at linebacker. So what do you go out there and get? You're not going to get a pass rushing specialist at the linebacker spot on the level of Caden Ellis. So let's go in the opposite direction, right? Let's get somebody who can specialize in coverage, right? In terms of what they can do on those passing situations. Then you add a guy like Channing Tindall, who's probably expected to be more of a special teams guy. But if he's expected to contribute on defense, he's bringing a ton of speed and potential in that area. So you kind of upgrade that level from where you were with Caden Ellis in terms of the speed at that linebacker position, getting a little bit more coverage. So I think overall the Falcons did an excellent job trying to fill that void. And basically it sounds like to me, Ian Cunningham listened to Jeff Ulbrich, where it's like, I need multiple guys to kind of fill this void. And it's like, okay, I'll give you like 7 or 8 guys and, go to work and see what you can do for basically the price of one Caden Ellis. And I think it has a chance to be very effective for the Falcons.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting approach, right? Because, when you think about a general manager, I always say that they have to have that kind of dual mind and saying, hey, okay, I gotta figure out to bring in guys that can help win games now. And I got to think about the future and trying to build from that aspect as well. And I think when you have the mindset that they had coming into this new league year, you have to say to yourself, okay, doing 1-year contracts and they're trying to get to 2027, like Miles mentioned earlier, like, hey, that can be something that we can be able to really go for the gusto essentially in 2027. But I really like that mindset because you have to at least act like you listen to the coaches when they're saying, hey, man, here's exactly what I want. I want to get this type of guy in here. And then you bring in those multiple guys, like you mentioned, Free. I feel like that's going to build a lot of equity when it comes to the relationships going forward and being on the same page or being in alignment, like Ian said, when it comes to the players that you're going to be looking at for the draft. So, Miles, when you think about the conversations that Ian and Jeff had coming into this new league year and about the type of player that he wants and the type of player that he can work with on defense, do you feel like that conversation was more so of, hey, Jeff, what do you want? Or was Ian kind of say, hey, here's what we're working with, and here's a pool of players that we can get, and you can kind of choose from those. So how do you feel like that conversation kind of went?
I think it's a solid mixture of everything you said. But, I do think a lot of this goes back to what that sportsology group said. And I think what the Falcons have spoken about ad nauseum when it comes to we need to have alignment with what we're looking for in this franchise, whether that's wins and losses, long-term picture, players, all that kind of thing. I think Arthur Blank and all these guys really mentioned it in all their press conferences, their introductory press conferences about being on the same page. This alignment of Kevin Stefanski, Ian Cunningham, Matt Ryan. I think this now goes down to the defensive front, the individual coaches as well, talking about what Jeff Ulbrich wants with Ian Cunningham. You bring in a guy like Christian Harris, 100+ tackles a few years ago. That's a very good Caden Ellis replacement. We talked about it last week on the show of just the amount of plays it seemed like Caden Ellis was involved in. Almost every time you see a tackle in the backfield or just in the middle of the field, whatever it might be, it looked like Caden Ellis was always involved. You need to have that guy that is always contributing, always in there, kind of getting involved in these tackling, and they got a lot more bodies there, in addition to Christian Harris, and a lot of them may not be starters, as Tori kind of mentioned. It could be sort of a committee type aspect where all these guys are getting involved in different second, third down situations where you're utilizing their best talents from a speed standpoint. You want to see a guy like Troy Anderson maybe get back out there potentially because look at the speed, look at the body. He's a guy that can go from sideline to sideline. I really think that theme is very present with this linebacking core. It's a lot of fast bodies. So I think that's sort of something that Jeff Ulbrich has been looking for. I might be wrong there, but just looking at it from a strictly numbers standpoint of what they are and the speed and agility that they bring, it seems like there is some alignment there in the type of player that they're looking for. So we're not going to know what the conversation was behind closed doors, of course, but at the end of the day, I do think that alignment has been very important across the board for not just the defense, but the offense as well. And I think so far it's reflected that. We've seen the amount of moves that they've made so far. So I wouldn't be surprised that Jeff Ulbrich has been right there in those meetings saying, hey, this is what we need to be successful. These are the types of guys I need to bring in, at least temporarily. We don't know what the draft could entail, just 5 draft picks, but from just a body standpoint, I think this is seemingly what Jeff Ulbrich is looking for right now.
So I know that we don't know verbatim what was said behind closed doors, but if you go to AtlantaFalcons.com, you can read a story that I think really lays out where this alignment began. And it was 2 days after Ian Cunningham had gotten the job. He called Jeff Ulbrich and Tommy Rees and said, hey guys, I need to get you in front of the scouts as soon as possible. So 2 days after Ian Cunningham signs on the dotted line, he brings the coordinators and the scouts together. And it's funny because I was talking to Kevin Stefanski about it, and he said if there was no time limit, they would probably still be talking, because what they did and what Ian asked the coordinators to do is kind of just go over what they need in certain players from certain positions, as well as kind of giving examples, free agency, but also draft examples of, hey, here is a guy who's like a 5th round pick that can do what we need in this position. Here's a guy who's a 3rd round pick who does some of the things that we need to do in this position. And so that very much was right off the bat, day 1, or I guess day 2, those were the conversations that were had, aligning on what the coordinators wanted and needed from their units, from the individuals who play in them. So even though we don't know, exactly what was said, we do know that those conversations were had very, very early on. And even Ian Cunningham says that a lot of what his conversations are with Jeff Ulbrich and also with Tommy Rees is sending them player clips, sending them highlights, being like, is this kind of what you're looking for in the linebacker position? Is this what you're looking for in a corner? And having that ongoing conversation. And if it's not, then Jeff Ulbrich's like, nope, not really. And you move on and you find somebody else. So those are all conversations that are continuing to happen. And that was kind of the very, very first thing that Ian Cunningham did when he came in the door.
One thing about having a clear vision is that you can't make any assumptions. And it's up to Ian to say, hey, is this what you're looking for? Because I understand what this guy brings to the table. So if Jeff says yes, I feel like that's the easiest way to get on the same page and pick some good players and bring those guys in there. Also in finding that value, especially when you come to the draft, because there are so many types of players, or like Terry used to say, so many different flavors out there, and it's all depends on what you like and what you're looking for. So the fact that those guys are getting on the same page, I feel like they're right on the right track. Now, we understand what this run defense was last year. And, I don't know if y'all know, but it hurts my heart to kind of be in a space where teams just can turn around and hand the ball off to you and just pound it down your throat. I'm not into that type of stuff. That actually sucks for me to watch. But Aaron, when you think about the signings of guys like Chris Williams and Lakel London, what do you think those signings mean for Jeff Ulbrich's defense? And they may mean 2 different things.
Well, yeah, I think Williams is going to probably be more counted on as a pass rush threat, but at the same time, I do think he has that disruptive capability against the run that you didn't really have outside of Brandon Dorlus last year on that interior defensive line, of that guy that can sort of shoot gaps and make plays in the backfield against the run, and generate some of those negative plays that will help set up that pass rush to get in some, favorable down and distance on third and down and whatnot. I think London is a big part of the Falcons run defense. We saw that run defense really get gashed in the first half of the season, culminating in that 300-yard performance by the Colts in Germany. But after that point, when they started giving more snaps to Lakel London and Kentavious Street, their run defense was pretty solid in the second half of the season. And I thought it made sense to make it a priority to bring back Lakel London, who was going to be a restricted free agent, and getting him at probably a little bit lower cost than you would have gotten as a restricted free agent on that $3.5 million tender, I think was a smart move by the Atlanta Falcons. And so I think those are 2 moves that really help, round out your D-line rotation. I think there's still room for growth there in the draft. You pick up Deshaun Hand as well, who's also known for being a plus run defender with the Chargers last year, giving you that sort of veteran in that room that you're now lacking without David Onyemata there. So, I think the Falcons did a solid job in free agency to try to maximize that D tackle room without spending a lot of money. But certainly, I think as we anticipate going into the draft, there's still going to be some potential room for them to maybe get a bigger needle mover early in the draft if the board falls a certain way, whether it's a Georgia player like Kristen Miller or someone like Big Citrus, Dominique Orange from Iowa State, some of those guys that are potentially in the mix in that day 2 range at that D tackle position. So I think the Falcons did a solid job sort of beefing up this run defense. But there's still, potential room to grow.
I wholeheartedly agree because, it is good to get those veteran guys and exactly what you're going to get from those guys. But I feel like they almost have to take a look at what this defensive tackle class, the heavy boys, are looking like in this particular draft. So and when you think about that, there are some names out there that couldn't fall in that mid-round range or mid to late round range that you can get your hands on because they are really good against the run, but they might not necessarily be their best at pass rush. And that's kind of how you kind of combine those things, combine those groups and come up with some nice waves of guys you can throw at guys that on first and second down, and then you swap those guys out on third down. So I think Nick Ollie and Jeff Ulbrich are definitely going to be pounding on that door, knocking on that door on draft day. Say, hey, don't forget about us over here now. But Miles, what about you? Where do you kind of sit when you think about these 2 signings of defensive tackle? Deshaun Hand, Aaron mentioned Lakel London, guys like Chris Williams seemingly look like those guys kind of geared towards trying to beef up against the run. So what are your thoughts on those signings and what they mean for Jeff Ulbrich's defense?
Yeah, again, it's not going to be any sexy picks, right? I mean, I know Lakel London and bringing a guy like that back isn't going to raise any eyebrows. But look, I mean, this is a guy that was second on the team in sacks for defensive linemen. I believe he was right behind. I guess does Dorless count as that other guy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So second on the team for sacks. I mean, he brings more than just run stopping at his potential. This is a guy that can also get to the quarterback. Pairing him with Dorless, hopefully he comes back to full strength. A guy like Rook, he's been very inconsistent there on the defensive line, has certainly shown some flashes, but you bring in a Deshaun Hand, you bring in some of those other guys, the Christian Harrises of the world, to shore up depth for me at this point. That's what this is. All these moves, I think, it really feels like a broken record. I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but it really does just look like a big time depth moves plural, that this team has been doing right now that they really need, because at certain points, I think the last 2 years really, and we saw that explosion of sorts really happen last year, but it seemed like depth on that line was a little wishy-washy. When Grady Jarrett was there, you didn't know what Rook or Dorless could offer at that point. They had some slow starts coming in 2023 or 2024.
They couldn't even dress out, Miles.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't be saying too much, but at the end of the day, last year was when that bump happened, and when some of these guys went out, you saw. I mean, this goes to the linebacking core, but you see a JD Bertrand make some starts. That love JD to death, nice guy, but he did leave some things to be desired at that linebacking spot. So I think you wanted to add some guys who aren't too proven, but a little bit more proven in the fact that some injuries have more or less slowed a lot of these guys down throughout their careers. So getting some guys that have had starting experience, that have made some impact on the defensive front for different teams. Like we said, we go back to the linebacking group of a guy like Christian Harris, of an Aziz Ojulari, not necessarily those defensive line guys. And we just mentioned what Lakel London did last year with the Falcons. So I really like the depth moves at the end of the day. They need some big bodies. They need some guys to come in these substitution packages, as we mentioned when Tori was on with us just now. But yeah, I think it's going to ultimately come down to that, and which guys can contribute where. And, there might be some moving around too. These guys are, I think, what's the word? Some diversification, I think, in the way they can play defense and the way they can be kind of flipped around in certain spots there in Jeff Ulbrich's defense, I think will be beneficial for them.
I think you just clearly define what Jeff Ulbrich's defense is. Multiple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't really have a strong base formation of what we like to do, because nobody does in today's football world. Because
there's no more 46 defense.
No, man, that's not going down. Although I do love 5-2s of
Grits
the world,
blitz,
and the bare fronts, man. Come on, man. We can get into it, Miles. You know, I'll get started. But coming up next, we'll talk about what is the best case scenario for Tua Tagovailoa. And I know Aaron is going to really love talking about what the worst case scenario for Tua Tagovailoa is next year. This episode of the Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a whole lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in the wait room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation, and that my situation is I'm trying to not have to pay. That's kind of my whole situation. But this year, going to get a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. You can go find you some reduced meat at Kroger. You know, you can do that. But just like that, I think you can get your every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local. That's turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right. We talked about Ian Cunningham and the value that he got with signing a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, and how this could essentially be a low risk, high reward type sign. But Miles, when you think about the best case scenario for the Atlanta Falcons, how do you see that playing out?
Okay, I think best case scenario for this team, because I think the team has been straightforward. I know some people haven't taken it this way, but I personally think they have been straightforward that they do want Michael Penix Jr. to be the guy. Now, all of this being said, best case scenario for the team, I think you're looking at Tua starting 1 to 2 games to start the beginning of the season, not rushing back Michael Penix Jr.'s injury, have him hold the ship afloat, ideally get some wins there at the beginning, no doubt, and perform, you would hope, pretty well at that point. But I think have him come in, ease Mike back in, and ultimately have Michael Penix Jr. finish out the rest of the season, and you have your answer that Penix is your guy going forward. Now, worst case scenario, the other side of the coin here is we're back to what we've been the last 5 years, right? It's that flip-flop, musical chairs quarterback room where Tua starts the season, does okay, Mike comes in, does okay, God forbid, gets hurt once again. I know that's been a big knock on him at this point, going back to his days at Washington, but it's just that whole musical chairs aspect. It's like, we're committing to Michael Penix Jr. He's our guy. He's not performing too well. 4 interceptions, in a couple games here, and now Tua's back inside the game, and he's doing okay. Then we reach next offseason, and it's like, okay, what do we do now? Do we still want to roll the dice with Michael Penix Jr.? I think at that point, the answer, you're going to have it on Michael Penix, but what's your answer going to be on Tua? It's just a 1-year deal, so it's not necessarily risky in that regard, especially with the money, but I think that's the worst case scenario for this team. Is it's just, once again, a musical chairs quarterback. I don't want to have a situation where every single week a different quarterback is going to be starting for the team, and we're going to have to hear, okay, we believe in Tua, we're moving forward with Tua. Oh, whoop, hold up, nope, Mike's back. We believe in him now this time. So I think that's the worst case that this team could be operating from.
I think that this new regime has the benefit of not drafting Michael Penix. So I feel, if he doesn't play well, hey,
which is why I say looking into 27.
Right.
Yes.
The last regime was wrong. And, hey, if you think about them not having their jobs anymore, that might kind of be right in the line with
Arch Manning.
No. Yeah, I know that's not Peyton or Eli. Right? I know that's the brother, Cooper. just want to put that out there. But anyway, we'll talk about quarterbacks later. But I think, when you have this scenario potentially playing out. When I look at best case, it's like you mentioned, 2 or 3 games, 2, maybe 3 games. They win 2 of them. You know, you go 2-1 and Tua go 2-1, Tua. You go 2-1 with Tua, and you kind of have him hold it down. Michael Penix is healthy. He comes in, he plays well, and you kind of figure out the season as you kind of go along. And Tua he has that nice sample size, like, hey man, I can still play football. And at the end of the year, he goes on to go sign a nice little deal. He don't sign no mega deal, but he signs a deal with a team that's looking to kind of reenact that whole Sam Darnold treatment, right? So teams are going to be looking for that. So I feel he understands where he is mentally, and because based off what Tori said in that conversation with him, like he's looking for a reset. So he's not saying, hey, I'm trying to go back to being the face of the franchise, but I am looking for a new place to be able to have some success so I can hit the free agent market, because quarterbacks are going to get paid. If you are halfway decent, if you're above average quarterback, you're going to at least get $30-35 million a year. So that's not a bad deal when you think about it. So that's best case scenario for me. But what about you, Free? Where are you as far as the best case scenario goes for the Atlanta Falcons in 2026?
Well, I think it's similar to what Miles outlined, where you get a couple of starts from Tua at the beginning of the season, keep this thing afloat, and then you toss the keys to Michael Penix whenever he's ready, and then he goes out there and plays well, and hopefully leads you to a winning record and a playoff berth, and then you can kind of move forward feeling pretty good about, okay, that old regime didn't get this wrong, and maybe they did get the long-term answer at the quarterback position, and we don't have to go into 2027 desperately searching for a sort of pivot point in that deep draft class that may or may not include the nephew of Peyton and Eli Manning. And I think that's your best case scenario. But like the worst case scenario to me is Tua starts most of the season, if not all of the season, and then like you finish like 8-9, and so you still come up short, like where it's just like you didn't even get the chance to really give Michael Penix a chance to show what he has. And then on top of that, if you make the playoffs in 2026, under Tua, at least you have that. You can say, okay, we finally snapped the playoff drought. That comes with its own issues, because then you're probably having a conversation about paying Tua. And then, do you want to do that? Because we saw that happen with another regime in Miami that, didn't work out for them particularly well. So I don't know if you want to sign up for that, but at least at the very least, you get the short-term value of being, okay, we don't have to worry about, going into year 10 without a playoff and whatnot. But I think the worst case is if you start to it with that in mind, where you get off to a good start and you're like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs this year. We started 6-3, it's all going to work out again. And then you fall short somehow. And so you didn't get to see Penix. Tua isn't the answer. And so you go into 2027 picking probably too late in the draft to be able to get a quarterback at the top of that draft. So you have to settle for like QB8 in round 3 or something like that. And then like you didn't get to evaluate Michael Penix, and then you're still not being like, well, Tua's our guy. So like you just wind up being stuck in quarterback purgatory and just continuing this path of mediocre outcomes for the Atlanta Falcons. Like that to me is kind of the worst case scenario for Atlanta. Like you want to come out of this season either knowing Michael Penix is the answer or not knowing Michael Penix is the answer, so that at least in 2027 you can potentially pivot there. But if you're coming out of the season without checking either one of those two boxes, I feel like that's a scenario that does not play to the Falcons' strength. And the only sort of third box that you want to check is just like, okay, well, we made the playoffs with Tua, and like at least we got that monkey off our back. And then that's really it, I think, in terms of like positive outcomes when it comes to the Falcons quarterback situation in 2026.
Yeah, man. If they're able to make a playoffs with Tua, that almost seems like a worst case scenario for me. Because like you said, oh, you gonna pay him $40 million you be the second team to kind of fail in that aspect, or about making another bad decision when it comes to quarterback spot? I just don't. I mean, based off of what it is, too early for me to be trusting Ian Cunningham right now as to be able to make a decision like that, because it's just, ever since Matt Ryan walked out of that door, man, it's just been spin the wheel of doggone quarterbacks. And we've seen some really bad ones. And if Tua comes in and plays a little bit better than that, and this team gets to the playoffs, oh man, we need to sign Tua. No, we don't. That man has built up a nice resume to go somewhere else and get paid for a quarterback desperate team. I think that this Falcons team needs to understand that they're trying to build for the future, and based off of the moves that we've seen so far, that's what it looked like they're doing. So I want to continue to stay on that track. Before we move on, I want to kind of get you guys' thoughts on Kirk Cousins. It became official, new league year, post June 1 cut. You know, they're going to split up the dead cap money over 26 and 27, and start thinking about, okay, where is Kirk going to play football in 2026? And I started seeing some names being floated around. Well, one name being floated around, and that is the Raiders. And I started thinking to myself, last time I checked, he don't want to be a backup quarterback. So, Miles, if Kirk's only option is the Raiders, do you still think he plays football in 26, or you think he kind of mosey on to the broadcasting piece?
It's tough. It's very tough. I do think Kirk wants to play in 2027. The Raiders do seem like a logical fit, but obviously we know, I mean, we don't know, but we seemingly know Fernando Mendoza will be their starting quarterback and their #1 overall draft pick. But I also do think there's a little bit of self-reflection maybe needed for Kirk Cousins when it comes to this. I mean, based on what he is, his age, what he's shown, can he be a starting quarterback? Yeah, but I don't know. Out of all the teams out there right now who have already made some moves, I mean, I guess you could maybe look at the Cardinals. They've already taken a few other Falcons at this point. I mean, who are you moving on with at this point now that Kyler Murray is in Minnesota? But the Raiders do seem like a logical fit. I mean, he has been taking some reps there with the Kirk Cousins has been taking some reps there in the broadcast booth, sort of like what Matt Ryan did. I don't know if he's going to take maybe a year and reassess, but at this point, you know, I would have said the Vikings might seem like a logical fit to kind of hold it down once again, not knowing what JJ McCarthy 9 is at this point, but you got Kyler Murray in the fold now that takes them out of the picture. So yeah, those were the two teams that I had my eyes on, that being the Raiders and the Cardinals, but I guess he could theoretically take a year off. I just don't see him doing that.
Yeah, Free, what about you?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I think Kirk is gonna have to wait and see how the draft goes. That the teams like Pittsburgh, where their quarterback situation is, you know, I know the Jets just got Geno Smith, so that kind of takes them out the running of, you know, aging veteran quarterback, and Arizona still is keeping Jacoby Brissett and whatnot. And so I think Kirk is in a position where he's just going to have to wait for that when it comes to what situation, as Miles pointed out, as yourself, Jarvis, you know, I don't think Kirk wants to ride the bench this year. I think he understands that may be the case if he's desperate to play. But as we already mentioned, like, he does have a pivot point. If he wants to go into broadcasting, you know, I'm sure CBS would be more than happy to add him to that group, as we've seen him, you know, do over the last 6 months or so when he's gotten those opportunities. And so he has a potential bright future. Maybe there's a case for him to go to the Raiders just to hang out with Tom Brady for a year and just kind of, you know, pick his brain on making that transition. And maybe that's a benefit for him more so than necessarily getting on the field in front of Fernando Mendoza. But I think Kirk is in a situation where he's probably going to have to wind up waiting.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, he's definitely going to have to play the waiting game, because teams are still trying to figure out what their plan is for 2026. Like I said, I feel like the draft is going to be a big indicator as to where teams are headed when it comes to signing a 38-year-old quarterback. So it's just going to see. But we'll wrap things up with talking about whether or not the Falcons are looking at some Georgia Tech guys. They signed some Georgia Bulldogs already. Let's see if they're going to take it to the flats. Wrap things up on the Falcon Squad show. Just letting you know that, hey, we're here for you wherever you download your podcast. And if wherever you download your podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. That's how people find out about the show. Also, once you're done with here, go on over to Locked On Falcons and check out my main man, Aaron Freeman. He is holding it down over there on Locked On Falcons. Falcons were out in full force at Georgia Tech Pro Day on Friday. No, Miles, you were there and kind of mixing it up and trying to see what's going on as far as with those players. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it out there, and I was a little jealous. I ain't gonna lie. I had a little FOMO watching all the video clips coming out. But do you think that when you look at the players that were out there for Tech, do you think there was some real interest there, or they just made the trip because, hey, it was close in proximity?
No, I think it makes complete logical sense. Look, Georgia Tech has not had the pro days or the players, for lack of a better term, for I'd say, I mean, you could honestly go before the Paul Johnson era just because of the players that were in that system, not counting that early class of, Demaryius Thomas, Jonathan Dwyer, Derek Morgan, all those types of guys. So this is, I think, the first time in a long time, and I think Georgia Tech's going to continue doing this with the amount of recruits and the guys that they've had come through the program that, no, I think this interest was very real. We saw Ian Cunningham there. We saw Matt Ryan there. They spoke to all these guys. We spoke to Haynes King. He said that he spoke to Matt Ryan. Now, are they going to take a guy like Haynes King? I don't know. If he falls to the late rounds, I'd be perfectly cool taking a flyer on Haynes King. Get us to Taysom Hill. He's hurt us long enough down there in New Orleans. But
I mean, a third quarterback. Yeah.
Why not? Why not? But no, for guys who I think that they could be seriously interested in, I'm looking at Eric Rivers, wide receiver, pretty fast, did pretty decent in this offense. I know it was very run heavy, but him, a guy like Amari Harvey, that would really help out with the secondary depth room. He did very well this past season for Georgia Tech. Good character guy. Jordan Vanderberg on the defensive line, as well as Keelan Rutledge, a All-American there on the offensive line. These are positions of need that I think can honestly, these guys in particular can offer a lot at the next level. And I think you can really get them later in the draft too. I don't think these are guys that you have to take flyers on in the second or third rounds. I think these are guys that could slip a little bit later that could end up being contributors for this team. So I'm excited. I hope that the Falcons maybe take a flyer on one of them because I think they've got some pretty good college tape to go off of.
Yeah, man. And I'm with you. The whole, I host Locked On Georgia Tech on our college channel. And I think when I looked at this Georgia Tech team, the guy that obviously you had Haynes King, he was just out of worldly, right? The man had at least 3 games where he had 20 plus carries as a quarterback. So yeah, he was doing everything for the offense. But when I look on the defensive side of the football, and I genuinely try to look for guys who pop, who make plays. And Jordan Vandenberg was that for me. And I was just like, I didn't know. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, like, why isn't this dude being invited to the NFL scouting combine? Did they think that Georgia Tech had too many players? Because they had 4, so that's
had a great pro day, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, he killed it. That man hit 225, 35 times. He ran a 4.9. He just did a 9'11" broad jump, had a 36-inch vert. Man, killed it. Yeah. Super athletic, just super athletic. And I think that was one of those, that was kind of like a burning question. I was like, man, this man should have been invited to the scouting combine. So I think that the Falcons probably should have some real interest because we talked about how, they need a defensive tackle, a young defensive tackle to kind of come in to usher into the fold and be a part of that rotation of veteran guys that you already have on this team. So, but yeah, I'm with you on that one. So, Free, what do you think as far as this kind of everybody in that moment were out there? You had Hood out there working out, Amari Harvey and a cornerback coach, DB coach, and Matt Ryan was there. He was in there in the all white, looking like the savior. You know, it's just like, what do you feel like?
Sanu was out there too.
Right. Yeah. You know, so do you feel like this interest, or that they were out there, do you feel like that interest was kind of real?
Yeah, I definitely think so. You already named a couple of guys that they would potentially be on the radar. Eric Rivers, the wide receiver, is probably the one that pops the most, just because the Falcons need as much help as they can get at wide receiver, even with the additions of Olamide Zaccheaus and Jahan Dotson. And Rivers brings a lot of speed, a lot of juice to that position. You do wonder a little bit now with Jahan Dotson in the fold. There's maybe a little bit too much overlap in terms of skill set, in terms of what they're potentially bringing to the table. But, adding another fast guy to that wide receiver core that has lacked a lot of fast guys over the years, as far as I'm concerned, that ain't no problem. So I think, you guys already mentioned a couple of the other guys, but yeah, I think there's the legit interest at Georgia Tech. Normally this time of year, they show up at Georgia and then don't draft the Georgia players. That's been a long running gag with the Georgia Pro Day, and then they show up at the Georgia Tech Pro Day because they got nothing better to do, and it's like, oh well, we'll just be out here for the local schools and whatnot. And then because Georgia Tech hasn't necessarily had produced the number of draft picks over the years, it's always just kind of been like, we're just here. But I think these last few years, Georgia Tech has had a few more players that they're introducing into the league, and I'm sure Brent Key hopes to close that gap between how many players they're sending into the league. And it may just be like, hey, just take players from the state of Georgia, not just from the University of Georgia, as a key to success that we've seen so much over the last 4 or so years when it comes to NFL teams. So I think there was legit interest, and there was a couple of guys like Rivers that really stand out.
Yeah, I think Rivers has a really good opportunity because he can do some special teams work for you as well. So that's how you make the club. So yeah, I think that, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I don't think that they will waste their time if they weren't interested in at least a couple of those guys and bringing those guys in. Before we get out here, kind of gotta throw this out here, and either one of you guys can hop in. What the heck is going on with Elijah Wilkinson and kind of throwing all this shade on social media? I know, Miles, you kind of like had the the bull by the horns with the report and everything. So I guess you can go ahead and get started with that, man. What's going on with Elijah? Like, what's wrong with this man?
Well, that was interesting because I think all that was happening during Georgia Tech Pro Day, and I've been working with a lot of different Falcons pages, fan pages, or whatever, kind of like going through different, posts or whatever. So I had 3 of these pages DM me these DMs that they were getting from Elijah Wilkinson. And at first I was like, no way this is real. Like, no way this is real. And I kept looking, and I was looking at the post, and he's like responding to all these comments. And this is just the comment section. This isn't the DM. So I'm looking at the comment section, which is very public, that I'm looking, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing this. Like, all right, this is public. Everybody can see it. Like, it's not like it's coming from his account. The blue check's right there. And then I was getting all the DMs that he was sending different groups. Like, he was in multiple DMs talking to these cats, criticizing Darnell Mooney, criticizing Kyle Pitts. I'm like, okay, it's one thing, and I get it. When fans are coming after you, like, fans need to be better. Like, it's not right. I don't think that to attack a player. But at the end of the day, this is a guy in the NFL who just signed with another team. I'm sure he doesn't want to burn bridges. It's also not like he's a bona fide starter in the league. He probably wouldn't have started at all last season without injuries to Caleb McGarry and Storm Norton. So a guy in his position, it's certainly very interesting and certainly a choice to take this route. But I don't know, man. That was really, really interesting. Not just the response, but the amount of responses that Elijah Wilkinson was giving out. So I don't know, man. I guess he feels pretty good about being back in Arizona.
Yeah, I think he's pretty settled in as to, yeah, I'm not there anymore. I don't have to see these guys face to face, and I'm pretty much say what I want. And it's kind of weird because, Elijah Wilkinson is from Pennsylvania as well. So I don't know what that's about, man. You look out for the home team. Kyle, you're from Philly, man. What's up? But anyway, for you got any thoughts on this?
Not particularly. Just lot of bridges being burned. I think Elijah Wilkinson's probably I'm probably close to the end of my career, so screw it. Let me empty the clip, and I guess if that's what he wants to do, what was it, Friday night or whatever it was, good on him. But yeah, certainly a choice to be made for that when it comes to deciding to really get after it in the comments. So, it is what it is.
The 28-3 comment seemed a little childish, I will say. Like, come on now. Really? That's the one we're going to use as the comeback?
Yeah, man. That I don't understand because I thought it was DMs because people were screenshotting. I'm like, oh, okay, it's a DM. Like he's DMing these people. So he was just out in the comment section, just free willing. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting choice in life. But I will say this though, to kind of sort of defend Elijah. Man was undrafted, been 10 years in the league, he vested. Hey man, okay, he wasn't planning on playing last year. I'm sure he was upset too. He had started off 17 games. All right, we'll wrap it up on that note. I want to say thank you for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen today. Don't forget to check out the great work that Tori's doing at AtlantaFalcons.com. Aaron Freeman over at Locked On Falcons, and my main man Miles Garrett holding it down, dropping that good content over at the Nest ATL. Make sure you guys check that out, and we will see you on Thursday.